Once a DJ is brought to you with the support of Vinyl Underground Record Store. Since 1993, VU's been shipping new and used underground house, techno, disco, hip-hop, soul and more worldwide from Northampton in the UK. They're your go-to store for upfront releases, repressed classics and deep digging for undiscovered gems, and they're a great crew to deal with who really care about the music and their customers. To show their support to the Once a DJ community, they're giving you 10% off your next order. Just head to vinylunderground.co.uk and use the code ONCEADJ10 at checkout, and you'll also get free UK delivery on all orders over £100. That's ONCEADJ10 at vinylunderground.co.uk.
Nice.
Before we get back to the show, I just wanted to tell you that outside of this podcast, I run a business called Remote Control. That's remote-ctrl.co.uk, and basically it's where I get to do what I love: audio and video production, design management, all of that sort of creative stuff. And the nice thing is, I don't do it alone. Over the years, especially through DJing, I've met some seriously talented people, from producers to designers to videographers and more, and we've built this little network where we can pretty much take on any creative project. So whether you need a podcast edited or a video produced or branding work or whatever, we've got you covered. It's honestly been one of the most rewarding things I've done, working with people I actually respect and enjoy collaborating with. So if you've got a project in mind or you're just curious about what we do, head to remote-ctrl.co.uk and let's chat. No pressure, just good creative work.
That was nice.
Welcome back to Once a DJ, everyone. I'm happy to have with me today Bay Area legend, DJ producer, DJ Design. How are you doing today, sir?
Doing well. What's up? How are you, Adam?
Yeah, I'm not bad. A little bit hot, but like I was saying to you before, I don't want to have the window open for the arguments and other nefarious activities we might hear through the window. So yeah, great. Really appreciate you making time for me today. I've done a fair amount of research, but I don't like to do too much because I don't want to end up guiding the conversation. So as with all the episodes, let's really just start with how you got into music and what your early influences are and where you grew up.
Yeah, sure. So I grew up in the Bay Area. Like most of my life, I'd say I grew up in San Jose, California, Santa Clara, like that area right there. That's where I met Peanut Butter Wolf back in the day, Charisma, Jeff Jank, who is was the designer for Stone's Throw. A lot of the Bay Area, like sort of hip hop was a really small community, really tiny, and we kind of all went to the same studio, which was what was it called? A guy named Peter something. Let me think. If I could come up with the name, I'll let you know. But we all kind of grew up on the same things, you know, listening to Eric B. and Rakim. You know what I mean? Like that era, like when you're in high school. Well, when we were in high school, in 1987, let's say, I was 16 years old, listening to the new, you know, Beastie Boys album when it came out in high school, you know, listening to Eric B. and Rakim, listening to Marley Marl, listening to Big Daddy Kane. And everybody in that era kind of listened to the same thing because there was no such thing as West Coast, East Coast. You know, there was none of that. It was like if a new record came out and it was let's say Steady B, What's My Name, Steady by Steady B, that's Philly. But you know, coming from Santa Clara, San Jose, it's just good hip hop music. I don't know any really difference. I didn't even really know where he was from when he's talking about the hilltop at the time, you know. But yeah, so I grew up out there, and everybody I knew listened to the same kind of music as I did, which was hip hop. But to go even before that, like, and prior to listening to hip hop music, now I have I'm the youngest of 6. And my dad was also a DJ when he was in the service in Korea. And so he had a record collection, and he DJ'd, and he was a huge fan of music. And I mean, he's still alive, thank goodness. And he's 85. And even to this day, he sends me, like the other day, for instance, he sent me a song by the Winstons, you know, the Amen Brother break. He sends it to me sincerely because he likes the Winstons. You know, he's not like, oh, check out this break. He's just like, check out this Winston song. And I'm looking, and it's like the same album that he gave me in like 1998, because he had that record with the Amen break, right? And he still sends me music. So growing up, I was around I would say a musical family that didn't play instruments. You know what I mean? Just huge rock and roll fans, huge soul fans, huge oldies, blues. My dad liked to say, like, oh, I've been listening to, you know, music so long that before rock and roll, I was a blues man, you know? So, and then if you look at pictures of him in the 50s, he had that like sort of pompadour hair, real cool looking, very cool suit, thin, you know, he looked like in Britain, it'd be like a teddy boy, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
He had that look, and he was like super cool. He was a dancer, like, you know, he'd go to the bars and clubs and win dance contests and stuff like that. And that's how he met my mom, apparently. But, so I grew up around this kind of music. So one of the earliest records that I remember, it probably was the earliest record that I ever thought was like, this is my own record, was a 45 of Smokey Robinson. And I believe it was like, let me think about it. It was, God, now I can't even think of it offhand. Jesus. I can't even think of it right now. But I remember there's a flip side, and I like both songs. Give me a moment and I'll think of it. But it was the first record I really loved, and I loved it so much that I was cleaning it one day on the carpet in our living room, and I put too much pressure on it, and it cracked. You know that? Oh, have you ever done that before? Well, yeah, I cracked it, and I was, you know, just so upset about that. And then the first record I ever bought on my own with my own money, leaving the house to do it myself, was Kraftwerk, and it was Tour de France. And that was probably 1983, I would say, 84, probably 84 maybe. And that was the first record, because breakdancing was like, you know, all worldwide at that point, you know, for the first time, you know what I mean? It was just all over the world, and that was a big song, at least in the Bay Area. They used to play it on the radio. When you would go to watch people breakdance at the movie theater, people would be breakdancing outside of this movie theater called Meridian Quad on Stevens Creek back in the day, right? And they'd be listening to it with their boom boxes, and everybody would be breaking and stuff like that. So I liked music early on, you know, since I was a very young person. And my influences were all my dad and my brothers and sisters. I would say my mom, but she liked Barry Manilow, and and we had one of those records in the house, and I just was not into it, you know.
Did you have much access then in the Bay Area to like the West Coast funk stuff?
I mean, so I had my brothers were about 10 years older than me. So when I was 10, right, they were about 20. So they were already listening to, I would say like, they already were listening to Flashlight by Parliament. You know what I mean? They were listening to Confunction. They were listening to, East Bay Grease. What is that album called? Sorry, I'm losing my train of thought a lot. But they were listening to a lot of that West Coast funk, right? But I had like brothers that were like part of that sort of disco era, right? And that funk era. And then I had a brother who was like in he was real young, but he was in a gang, you know, in the late 70s, early 80s. And, you know, little like Latino gang. And they would listen to oldies. And so I listened to a lot of his oldies. Basically those, what are those, East Side?
East Side Story.
Yeah, East Side Story volumes, you know, like listening to a lot of those. And to this day, whenever I visit him back in the Bay Area, and we always go golfing together, and he has his phone, and all he's listening to while we're golfing is oldies, you know.
Oh,
Love
so
it.
good though.
Yeah, man, I love oldies, and he's a huge fan of that stuff. And he actually turned me on to a song I never heard before, so I bought the record. But it was some rare, what is it? Tommy James and the Shondells song that I never heard before. I can't even think of the name of it right now, but he turned me on to this new song because I was a huge fan of Crimson and Clover, Crystal Blue Persuasion, all that whole record. But he was listening to this one song, and I was like, "Oh my god!" So I went on Discogs and bought that vinyl. You know,
man, it's. I'd love to buy more of that sort of oldie. Well, I'd love to start buying some of that oldie stuff, but I feel like to get the good stuff, you've just got to invest so much, and particularly being on this side of the water as well.
Oh, I know, I bet. But you guys, you guys were into that. What do you call it? That kind of soul, northern soul, and stuff like that.
There was the northern soul, yeah.
And so you have a lot of probably imports that have come in that we don't have, you know, Philly soul, yeah.
But just that oldie stuff. I think I think you've got to be seriously kind of spending some cash to get good stuff with that.
And that's a thing. Like I don't like to do that. I don't like to spend money on expensive records. I like finding a deal. And if I could listen to it on vinyl and it has cracks and pops, doesn't bother me one bit. Like I enjoy it to sound like that because I know that I'm not listening to Spotify. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I suppose the thing is when you can hear the cracks, you know that physical piece of vinyl has got a story behind it.
Yeah, it's got a story. You know, I don't mind that. In fact, I was talking to my friend, this guy named Dave Paul. He's the one who created Bomb Hip Hop magazine. He's a good, like, probably one of my closest friends. And I was like, they need to do a grading system. It sounds like maybe I was like drunk or something, but I was like, they need to do a grading system of the static. You know what I mean? Like, because if you go to, let's say you buy a mint record, right? Okay, it's mint. It sounds, you know, almost like a CD, right? What's the point of that? Like, you want there to be a little bit of little pop here and there, a little static, because you want it. And then I was like, they should grade between that, but they probably already do. I mean, that's what those gradings are, but it doesn't really give an accurate description, you know. There's so many different kinds of hiss and crackle, you know. So
the thing that got me the other day is I bought a few records from this shop, and then I got them home and I was like, because I'd looked at them because I'm mindful of looking at them for the state of them, but then I got them home and like a couple of them were like bold and warping really badly. And you know, as a DJ, you're just like, oh.
Yeah, especially when it's on the what do you call it, the convex side, and your vectors, that's the worst.
So being around those guys and being into hip hop, then when did you kind of get the itch for DJing?
Probably in high school, a couple things happened. One, I probably heard what's his name? Herbie Hancock did the song
Rocket with the ST, yeah.
And seeing that video, right? And then hearing Run DMC's first record and Jam Master Jay, hearing all that stuff when you're really young, it was just like something you never understood, never heard before, and it was just fascinating. And I still remember, I have vague memories of walking to school, and while I'm walking to school, because I didn't know how it was done, because when I would try it with our home record players, you know, there's a rubber mat there, it's probably belt drive. I remember my brother had a Yamaha system at the time, and it was belt drive, you know, one of these like rack systems, you know, that they had back in the day. This was probably mid like 80, 85, 86 or something, and I just didn't understand. Every time that I pulled the record back, the whole thing would skip, the belt would fly off, and so I'd walk to school thinking like, how is this done? You know, and I remember walking back and forth to school, just thinking in my head, how do they do this? At the same time, listening to, you know, the latest release from UTFO or something like that, right?
Yeah.
And so I was really like, I had to figure this out. And then luckily I had a friend in high school named Trevin, and his brother was a few years older than him. So his brother was maybe like, 19, 20, and he had turntables. He had two Technique 1200s and a mixer, maybe like an old Gemini or something like that. And we went over to his house, and it was the first time I got to like understand it. And I was like, oh my God, I could not believe it. So I always wanted to go over to his house, to go into his brother's room and, and play with those records. And he had all that. He was a Filipino kid, so he had all that sort of what do you call it, freestyle music, but he had a lot of hip hop music, and we just spent hours in there learning how to scratch. I mean, that was like the most interesting thing in my life at that time,
Yeah, and for me, based on anything I've watched and listened to, the Bay Area is so closely associated with the highest level of turntablism.
I know, that's another thing, man. Like,
what was it like being in that scene?
It was crazy because everybody was so good at DJing. Everybody was so good at scratching, and it was, there was, for instance, around 1995, so I was 24 at the time. I had was living in Seattle for a couple of years, and a few friends of mine and I, when Showbiz and AG did the what is the song called, the Nighttime Remix. Sorry, it was called Next Level Nighttime Remix. It's Showbiz and AG's biggest song, and we flew them out to do a show in Seattle, and Rock Raider was with them. It was Rock Raider, it was Party Artie, and AG, and I think Wally World, right? There's a long story I could get into, but I won't. But Showbiz couldn't make it, and because he had been arrested for alleged murder. So we had to change his plane ticket. We had to change his plane ticket, which was crazy. And so, we didn't know what we were getting into. You know what I mean? It felt so scary. Oh my God, these guys who are from the Bronx are coming to see us to do a show. And one of the guys has a murder rap. You know what I mean? So that was weird. But what I was going to say is when they arrived, it was totally the opposite what you would think, during that, especially during that time. Everything was a lot of tension, with rappers at that time, and they were the nicest.
Do you mean sort of East versus West beef stuff?
It was a little prior to that, but there was just a lot of early sort of East Coast gangster rap, like Mobb Deep, Black Moon, a lot of these rap, Showbiz and AG, you know what I mean? Who were, thuggish, but East Coast, and Fat Joe. Anyway, so when they arrived, what I was trying to get to is that's when I met Rock Raider. And Rock Raider, the first sort of thing when he heard that I was from the Bay Area, asked me was, do you know DJ Flair? And I was like, yeah, I know DJ Flair. I don't know him well, but I definitely know him. He's like, I want to meet DJ Flair. He's like, this guy, does this scratch that I just got to hear it in person. And I don't know if you've ever met Rock Raider or know him. He's the most bashful, shyest, timid guy in real life that you ever meet. Yet when he's on those, turntables, he kind of forgets all that, and he's having so much fun that he's just destroying it. You know what I mean? Just killing it. And it was so weird. You know what I mean? I'm from the Bay Area. I have these guys out, and they're all supposedly this thugged out, entertainment. And they I would open the door for AG, like to let him into like an apartment room or something. He'd like turn around and go, thanks, thank you. Like he was just so polite. Party Artie, who was just known as, a rah-rah, rugged rapper. Such a polite, nice guy. There was like, they would, you would say like, come on in. They go, oh, should I take off my shoes? They're so polite and respectful. It was not only a shock, but I had to ask them why and how and all that. And, and they were like, that's just the way they were raised. You know what I mean? They grew up that way. And, their parents were good parents to them, And so it was kind of just like, you know what I mean? You build up this myth in your head about people through the music, but then when you really meet them, they're actually really great people, So, anyways.
Could you tell us a bit more about Flair? Because I think he's an interesting one because his contribution, like the Flair, is just unbelievable. But I don't know if he kind of gets the credit he deserves.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I don't I didn't hang out with him much, but I hung out with him during some important times, along with, because he used to be like Cubert's right-hand man. And, one time I would say in around 1998, I was back in the Bay Area, back in San Francisco, and I had he was a cousin who was in only like 8th grade. And every Thursday they would have at their school in San Francisco, which was close to Cubert's old neighborhood, right? They would have on Thursdays a DJ class sort of after school, which a teacher sponsored. And one time my cousin invited me to say, hey, would you come and be like a guest DJ to kind of teach everybody, right? And I said, sure. And I was like, oh, shit, thinking to myself, what am I going to do? I have no idea. So I called Cubert up. I was like, yo, Rich, can you do me a favor? Would you kindly, I'm like really polite, would you please join me, and go and see my cousin's class that he belongs to? And, as soon as I started talking about that, he's like, oh, dude, totally, let's go. Oh, dude, oh yeah, dude, totally. And I was like, okay, cool. And he's like, I'm gonna bring Flair, we're gonna do this thing. And it was this thing that was actually became a like a history lesson that they created, right? And this was just like the sort of the pre, what would you call it, like the test before they actually brought this out to the world during one of their scratch cons, right?
Oh yeah, when they go through the development of all the different techniques. Yeah.
So they were just developing that still, and so they were really excited to come, and that could have been one of the reasons. But another reason is because they're just such they're such good guys. You know what I mean? Like they were willing to do that and come and be nice to all the kids. And so they did that, and they did that whole history lesson from the beginning of scratch to the future. And the future was Cubert and Flair's type of cutting, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Doing the Flair scratch, doing orbits, and doing all the, crab scratches and stuff. And they did all that, but they started Jugga Jugga, you know what I mean? They started with all that stuff. And watching that, I was also just as impressed as the kids were, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But it left a deep impression on those kids. And, since one of those kids was my cousin, he still, will never forget that day. I know some of his friends, and they all do music. And they're like, if it wasn't for that, you know what I mean? I probably would have been a doctor.
Yeah.
But now I'm just a guy who does music and,
Is there anyone from those early days? Because I'm guessing, you had like the Beat Junkies round there as well. And
that was L.A.
Oh, right. Sorry.
Yeah. But so that was like back in those days, L.A. was like thousands of miles away, even in your head, you know what I mean?
Right,
like you'd get to go there every now and then. Like there'd be conventions, certain conventions you'd go to, and then you would meet up and see some of these people that you had there, their mixtapes, like Rip One or, you know, Cut Chemist. You'd have like a tape or something that somehow you got, you know, at a record store. You know, they used to sell a lot of cassettes like that, and then everybody, you know, dubbed copies, you know, for each other. So I would have a bunch of dubbed copies of a lot of these guys, and I would see them every now and then at a convention. You know what I mean? And I would just get to meet them for a few minutes, you know. But the Bay Area had, you know, a huge amount of DJs in all various styles. That was more than enough. Do you know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
But yeah, back then it was very seldom that I'd make it out to LA.
Was there anyone that you saw battling or anything in those early days that really blew your mind that went on to?
Yeah. So my friend Dave Paul, he had a series of shows, these bomb hip hop showcases that he would have a bunch of rappers come out and from all over the United States, right? Some big ones too. He has more of he remembers more of that, like who was there exactly, but there were some big people I can't remember exactly. But some of the guys that were there, this was like in the early 90s, like 93. He had what was the name? Rob Swift.
Yeah.
And I think Rob Swift at the time was like Akinelli's DJ, I think. And so I got to see Rob Swift's DJing where he was like cutting up Black Sabbath and stuff like that. And then FM 2.0 was there, which was, you know, Cubert's.
Cubert, Mike and Apollo, wasn't it?
Yes. And so I got to see all that stuff early on. You know, I was probably like 22. Which, you know, I was about either the same age as these guys or even older than them. Do you know what I mean? At 22. And so when you grow up and later on, you're like, wait a minute, you know, like those guys were like a couple years younger than me. You know, they already seemed like legends. You know what I mean? Like it was really weird. But yeah, I got to see all of that stuff firsthand usually because, you know, since I was friends with Dave Paul and also Peanut Butter and Charisma, who also performed at that show, and Charisma killed it, man. But yeah, that was like I don't know, I guess I was just lucky, like, to be in those circles early, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I was always outside of it because I was never a huge, like, scratch DJ. I loved scratching and I wanted to get better at it. And, like I told you about my early days of wanting to know how the hell do they even scratch. As soon as I got my first equipment for sampling, which was the ASR 10, that's when I like slowed down on scratching. I wanted to produce. I wanted to produce and produce and produce. So I just kept making beats and then scratching just as an accompaniment to my beats.
Did you ever play out then? And mix live or anything, or is it always just?
No, I most of my days in San Francisco, I was like a DJ for bars and clubs, events like that. And the first time I actually DJ'd a big show was in England in like 1998 with Rasco, Planet Asia, Peanut Butter Wolf, and DJ Surge and me. And I remember playing some big club with Wolf. Me and him were DJing together somewhere in London, big. And I was like so nervous. We had this table and just a huge crowd, right? And I would go down to grab records and I would stay down there long because I did not want to stand back up. And he's like, just come back up here. Just come back up and do something. But I was having also this reflection from the sound coming back on me. And so there was a space between my scratch. So I'd go jugga and it would like jugga like, you know, a millisecond or so later. And it was confusing. I was just so frightened, man. But I still, even now thinking about it, I'm like getting like nervous thinking about it, you know?
Something I realised a few weeks ago when I was playing somewhere. I was playing a 40th and playing really commercial stuff, which I don't often do.
Yeah.
But I wanted to get in at this venue, so I was playing this set, and I was getting requests that I wasn't expecting based on, it's always the way, isn't it? You get a bit of a, this is the type of thing we want, and then someone asks you for something completely different.
Yeah,
So you're like, how do I go in between? And I always kind of like, I look at people to see what subtle cues I can get. Is someone tapping their feet? Are they just doing
no
that?
doubt,
You know, if it's not that time of the night where people are going for it, you're just trying to just get those cues to see if the vibe's right. But then I realise how awkward it is if someone looks back and realises that you're looking at them. You just like, so it is easier, I think, just to stay under the decks and hide.
Yeah. No, I know what you mean. It is smart to sort of look at these cues and, you know, sort of take them into consideration of what you should do next. I do that a lot. And I always tend to also, try to get girls out to dance, because once you do that, then you could play pretty much anything and people will come, you know. But it's hard. And the thing is, like, I don't enjoy DJing really, like I realized, you know, like, because I don't like to play anything but music that I really like, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of times, you know, you're kind of forced to play all this music or it's just the latest hits, you know, and I'm not a fan of the latest hits. And the more I listen to music, the more I'm not interested in commercial music, or, you know what I mean? I like stuff that I could bob my head to, but I don't want to, you know, do like a breakdown of, you know, hip hop, you know, Cheryl Lynn, or, you know, I don't want to be like the guy who knows all the classic hip hop stuff. I don't feel like that's me, you know what I mean? I want to be who I am, and that would be, you know, let's say playing like a rare Mobb Deep joint or something like that, you know what I mean? And then playing like I don't know, like a Richard Harris song, you know what I mean? Like from the 60s, you know what I'm saying? Like I don't like DJing because I don't like to play what everybody wishes that they want to hear, you know what I mean? Like I just hate it. I'll say it right here, I just cannot stand DJing, you know. Like if people came literally just for me, then you have a lot more you know, not just opportunity, but they're coming because you're just a tastemaker, right? And they're like, okay, we trust what he does, you know. But even then, I mean, I would get maybe a small crowd, you know, like, because I just don't want to play. I don't want to get the crowd up. You know, I don't want to get them all feeling good. I want to get them feeling, you know, mad, like they want to sock somebody. You know what I mean? That was like the first time, like, I used to listen to my headphones walking down the street with like the Wu-Tang's first record. I'm like, it makes you just want to clench your fists and punch the shit out of somebody. You know what I mean? And I love that. Now people use that for like working out, you know, it's my workout tape, you know. But when you're young, you're a teenager, you got all this angst in you, that music feels really good. And I love that music. You know what I mean? That's what I like it for. I want to feel that way. I'm not going to really like attack somebody because I'd probably get killed, but you feel that way. You feel that sort of anger when you're listening to these rappers, and that's good. Mobb Deep, MOP, those kind of guys make you feel good, you know. And even though it's just hard, you know. And I wish I could just kind of do that. You know what I mean? Give that out all day, you know.
So before you mentioned about charisma. And I absolutely loved the Charisma Peanut Butter Wolf album.
Oh yeah, classic. So classic. Good. The production is so good, and Chris has been good like that since the '80s. You know.
Yeah. So were you guys around? Because that album, for anyone that doesn't know, and there's always room for me to be wrong about this. I think they signed to Hollywood Basic on Disney, or a Disney-owned label, and then the album ended up getting shelved, didn't it? And then Charisma died, I think, quite tragically, wasn't it?
Oh, yeah. I got the phone call from Chris when he was at Stanford Hospital, and Chris was there and was like, told me at night, it was like 10 p.m. He's like, Charisma passed away. I go, you know, like, what?
Yeah.
And he's like, I'm at the hospital right now, dude. It was probably the most traumatic thing that ever happened to me at that age. You know what I mean? I was probably like 22, 23. And, you know, somebody who had so much life and just a handsome guy. Everybody loved him. He was charismatic, you know, and very fun, super funny. And for him to just one day, you know, you hear that he's dead, it was like a shock, you know. It was a really sad time, you know.
Were you around those guys when they got signed and when they were making that album? And were they the first people in that sort of social group that had got that opportunity?
Yeah, from who I knew. Yeah, I was there when Chris was still making that record, finishing it, you know what I mean? He would show me a bunch of songs too, and, you know, ask me what I think, and, you know, and I was always like super impressed by what he can do with the EPS, because remember the EPS is like Sonic EPS is it's a mono sampler, right? And he was doing all this panning left to right, and, you know, things were like going in and left and right, where it just felt like stereo. And they used it also like as like call and response, and, you know what I mean, like charisma.
Get ready on the left, get ready on the right.
Yeah, he was just really clever. But yeah, that was, and in fact, it was called Apogee, Studio Apogee. That's where Charisma and Peanut Butter Wolf went, and that's where my group, Foreign Legion, Prozac and me would go also. We just weren't nearly as good as they were, you know what I mean? But we went to the same studio. Charisma, you know, I used to go to the coffee shop with him and Wolf together, and at that time Jeff Jank, and we'd all go and do our little, like, you know, we were real young, early 20s, and Charisma was probably like 19 or something, and we'd go to coffee shops back in those days, because it was like where all the cool kids hung out in a suburb, you know what I mean? Like, it was like back then you call them mods, M-O-D, you know, mods, and everybody would dress, you know, a little like, you know, some Depeche Mode look, you know what I mean? Like, it was good times, you know. And Charisma was cool enough in those days, like, to go to these places and enjoy himself, you know, at the coffee shop.
Yeah.
Everybody's just looking at, you know, girls, you know, at that time. And back then it was like there was a lot of social segregation, right? Like, if you were a mod, you weren't a skinhead. If you were a skinhead, you weren't a guy into hip hop. If you were a guy into hip hop, you weren't into, you know, metal. And if you were into metal, you weren't into disco. You know what I mean? It was like very socially, musically segregated. And so for Charisma to be like totally into hip hop and then come with us out to like these cute little mod girls hanging out, you know, with their short hair and their black clothes, it was really, you know, he was like standing out, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
He was like willing to hang out like that.
Yeah. So a couple of things. Just one point to add on about Charisma's, about Peanut Butter Wolf's production. Something I find really interesting that with that album, it'd be interesting to get your take on it, because you understand the samplers and things, is the drums. A lot of the drums sound like he's sampling them from Marley Marl, and or if it's the same drum machine that Marley Marl uses for like Marley scratch and stuff like that. But the way, and they're like really hard sort of drum machine drums, a lot of them on the album, but then they're kind of contrasted with some quite sweet, uplifting, happy sort of melodic samples as well.
Yeah, I think I know what you're talking about. Yeah, like even back then, Chris was like already looking at that Marley Marl era of 88, 89 as like a nostalgia. Do you know what I mean? He was looking at it nostalgically, even because remember he did a song called "The Chronicles," and that was on Dave Paul's record label for the what is it called? The Return of the DJ series, right? And so even back then, and when he made The Chronicles, which was around 93, he was already looking at it like nostalgically, you know what I mean? And so when he did those songs, Keep On Rockin' It, I think you may be talking about, on that Big Shots record. And he's using these like old samples, right, that were on, you know, or either early Marley Marl records, or like, even before that, like, Funky 4+1 and stuff like that. He was finding these drums from records that he already owned, because he was a huge collector even back then. And his local record shop was Star Records, and Star Records had a lot of hip hop from back then.
Right.
But so all those were mainly samples, not literal drum machine stuff. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Samples into the EPS from records that were using those early drum machines.
Yeah. So what was the process for you guys getting into the drum machines and learning them? Because now, like, a lot of it's, you go on YouTube or with the MPCs, you've got the guys that have made MPC Bible. Like, what was the learning curve?
Well, it was tough, but thank goodness, like, when I bought my ASR 10, it was right when they came out in like 93 or something, and Peanut Butter had the EPS. But when I bought the ASR, I wasn't buying it thinking, oh, Chris has the EPS. I just kind of bought it because that was what was available at Guitar Center at the time. And, that was it. You know what I mean? You could buy that. And that was, I think, the only sampler they had, and it was very expensive. It was like $2,600 back then in 93 money. That's like, you could buy a car, a good used car, and then lucky enough, I had Chris there to go, oh, you have an ASR 10? I could come by and show you how to use this, and so, you have this machine, or, back then it was like this. For me, it was like this complicated thing. It's got a keyboard. There's all these buttons on top, and you're like, what is a sequencer? You know what I mean? What is, when you hear a metronome and you think, before you're thinking of a sequencer and stuff, you're thinking a metronome, like, playing a piano and learning like timing, you know what I mean? It's just a metronome. You're not thinking, oh, this is where you place sounds on. Like, you really, before there was like videos of this, or YouTube or anything, you just don't even know what the hell is going on. Oh, it says press record what? Like, it was that confusing. So when Chris came by and he showed me all these basics that he knew how to make beats, and then from there on, anything else, you just got to figure it out. And so for the longest time, I just used the ASR from the sort of lesson that he taught me. And I even had like these discs that said like Peanut Butter Wolf lesson, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And, for the longest time, I would load that same disc just to listen to it and figure out what was done. It's very tough. But, once you kind of figure that out, then you want to teach other people. And I ended up meeting this guy named, well, his real name's Rob, but his producer name was Fanatic. And Fanatic is known for producing Rasco's first big single, which was called The Unassisted. Now, The Unassisted was like, it blew up in the Bay Area, and it blew up worldwide. I mean, people in Europe knew it. He toured a lot because of that record. And I actually taught Fanatic how to use the EPS. I mean, he had the 16 plus, the EPS 16 plus, but I taught him how to use that because Wolf taught me how to use the ASR. And we became such good friends that we moved in together and became roommates in a studio, like a small apartment studio where it just had two beds on either side of the room. Then our keyboards, so our own records, do you know what I mean? Like our own turntable, and then sharing the bathroom. And then he ends up moving in with Peanut Butter.
Right.
When Peanut Butter finally moved out of his parents' place, his mom's place, and they got a place together downtown San Jose. Downtown San Jose was like, wow, you're living in downtown big time, because we're all in the suburbs. But even downtown San Jose is just a tiny little suburban neighborhood, with a few coffee shops, a movie theater,
Yeah, so I think you mentioned before we recorded, this was kind of the area that is Silicon Valley now.
Yeah.
So was it affordable back then?
Well, I mean, no, not really. It never. I don't think it ever really was. It was,
Right.
like we lived in a place that was my brother's, what we call his side house. Right. He had a home, and then next to his home, like this add-on that was just like a one bedroom, or one
Right.
room studio, and we both shared rent in that, and we probably paid like $300, for that back then. Yeah, it wasn't that much, but that was like money back then. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And that's in what, in the 90s then?
Yeah, this is like 93, Then Fanatic moved in with Wolf, and I think they lived with a couple other producers. I can't remember who, but it was Fanatic, Wolf, maybe Andreas.
So was that around the same time Stone's Throw was forming? And when did Foreign Legion happen? Was Foreign Legion before or after?
It was kind of during. So I knew the rapper in Foreign Legion since I was maybe 13 years old. We were in the same junior high school. And so we always were into rap music together, and we started like playing around, in around 1988 to try to like learn how to make rap music. We, save some money. I remember studio time was about $15 an hour back then to go to like a professional studio, which was somebody's garage, basically converted, and it's usually some like metalhead, like who has gear, but it was expensive. But we started doing that around 88, but we never knew what to do with it, you know what I mean? And then Wolf, I knew him concurrently, and they were getting really serious when, getting signed to Hollywood Basic. And Chris started talking about starting a label, right? And I remember he used to call me up and ask me, like, can you think of some names? What are some names you could think of? And I thought of Worldwide, call it Worldwide Records, because that just sounds cool. And it was also at the time Pete Rock and CL Smooth's record came out, Main Ingredient, right? And there was that song Worldwide, and I was like, name it Worldwide, that'd be so dope. But he ended up naming it Stone's Throw, and that was sort of ties in more with Charisma and him. They're sort of joking all the time, because apparently the mom would say, your dreams are just a stone's throw away, like she used to say cute things like that. And they used to always laugh at her, the mom, thinking she's, so old, or, the way she acted is so old world, but that was a really good tie-in calling it Stone's Throw. It really was sort of like Peanut Butter honoring Charisma and the joke that they had with the mom.
Yeah. So, and you did some of the design work early on, as I understand it.
Yeah, so I used to hang out with Chris like every single day. It was like, we wake up, and then it's like Chris will call, pick me up in his car, and we just hang out all day, doing music, record shopping, furniture shopping, because he's just got a place in San Francisco. So he's always taking me furniture shopping, and, hanging out in the car, listening to beats, listening to his beats, listening to, records that we liked and stuff. And so we just like intensely hung out all the time. You know what I mean? It was just like from beginning of the day to the end of the day, just always like hanging out side by side for a long time. And so during those were formative years of Stone's Throw. And Peanut Butter Wolf got a job at TRC, which is the local music distributor in South San Francisco. And I got a job at like Esprit. It was like a women's clothing store, you know what I mean? And so he was good, where he figured out, I'm going to work for a distribution company, and that's going to help him to get closer to his goals, and there was a couple people there that were willing to invest in putting his music out, especially after Charisma passed away.
So how did you end up doing the design? Had you studied design at college or anything like that?
No. I was like, at the time, the way I met Peanut Butter Wolf and Charisma was literally, it was, of course we had this thing in common where we both went to the same studio, but we didn't know it because we booked different times, obviously.
Right.
But it was it was because at this period of time in like maybe 89, I worked at Macy's, and I was selling clothes and stuff like that. And this girl was working there. Her name was Teresa Castro. And Teresa Castro was talking about being the designer and photographer for this rap group named Charisma and Peanut Butter Wolf. And I was like, oh, wow, that's pretty cool. I love hip hop music. I do hip hop music too, and this is a long time ago. So it's like, what did I really do? Just practicing, you know what I mean? But so she was like, telling me about all this. And I was like, oh, wow, I have this silkscreen company with a friend of mine that we were starting at the same time as I was working. And, I was like, I could print their t-shirts if you come up with, the artwork and stuff. And so that's kind of how it all went down. I ended up meeting Peanut Butter and Charisma, and then we started talking about, talking to each other about what are we going to do to create a logo and create a design. And then about a week later, Wolf comes to me with Jeff, and Jeff created the Charisma and Peanut Butter Wolf logo, which was like this inky, like ink spilled sort of design. It looked kind of like a Misfits logo or some punk rock logo, And I looked at it and I was like, okay, cool. And then I called up Chris later and I was like, Chris, you can't just have this as the logo. You have to have like a circle around it, or it's got to be encapsulated in something, because it's just these loose letters that don't really have like a structure to. And he told that to Jeff, and Jeff gets like pissed off easily, and Jeff instantly hated me for that. They brought it back, and there was this really thick circle for the logo. And I was like, okay, that works. Let's do that. And so we printed shirts with that logo as the first thing. And that's how we all became friends. And then a few months later, Jeff reaches out to me on the phone and was like, hey, man, do you want to be in a band with me? I was like, all right, I don't play anything, but sure. And he's like, you don't have to know how to play anything. I have a bass I could bring over, and you could do the bass and I'll play the guitar. I was like, okay, cool. And I go, and I have the ASR 10. We could like loop drums and then make songs like that. And then we talked, and he goes, the reason why I wanted you in the band, he's like, because you look like Sid Vicious. Because back then I probably weighed about 118 pounds. I don't know what that converts to, but really emaciated, right? And real skinny, and dressed more like punk rock than I would dress hip. I never dressed hip hop. I hated that look. I like dressing more like a mod or punk than looking hip hop, because it just, not only did it not fit who I am, you know what I mean? That's a lot of times why people back in those days, they would like trip out that I was even hanging out with all these people, right? In fact, Rasco, not too long ago, I was talking to Rasco, and he's like, dude, he goes, one time Peanut Butter told me that you had all these dope beats and that you're a dope producer. And he's like, Keith? You know what I mean? Like that. He's like, Keithy? Because people used to call me Keithy, like them, no one else, just did that circle. The Peanut Butter used to call me Keithy Sweets, and his sister used to call me Keithy Sweets, and I hated it, but I didn't care. But because of that, Rascal used to call me Keithy. And he was like, yeah, dude. He goes, and I looking at you like, that guy? Why would this dude make beats, right? And he goes, and then I heard your beats, and then we ended up doing the song What It's All About together, you know what I mean? And then a few years back from now, like just only like 3 or 4 years ago, he hit me up and was like, dude, I want you to do a whole album for me. He's like, because you have the most special ear and said all these compliments basically. But then he got too busy because he's, a grown up and he has kids and a day job that he has a career with, But we're doing 3 songs and we have an EP coming out soon. So
awesome. Yeah, awesome. You'll have to send over the info when it comes out.
Yeah, it's crazy, right? The last time I did a song with him is like 1999, and now we're doing a few more songs together. So really excited about that.
So, first question then, to come on from what we've said. Did DJ Design become the moniker because of your eye for design?
Yes.
Or was that... Right. Because when I was doing the research, I was like, all right, yeah, DJ Design, it makes so much sense. Of course.
Yeah, so at the time, Wolf needed a lot of help wherever he can get it, right? And so, I always am someone with I'd say like I talk a lot, you know what I mean? I talk, and I studied art on my own. Like I didn't go to college, but I studied all kinds of books on modern art and, more like ancient art and stuff. And I was really fascinated with that stuff. Like that's all I mean, this is again before computers, right? So I was always at the library checking out books and learning about painting and learning about, learning what my favorite things in art was, to where, it ended up reducing at that time down to like Dadaism, like I really was fascinated with Dadaism, and it just, looking at the, images, reading the whole background of how it was like this reaction to World War I and the atrocities that happened then. Like all this stuff impacted me because I liked art that had like a real struggle or a real like, I'm anti-war. I hate war. And people making art that is sort of a reaction to atrocity sounded good to me, you know what I mean? And when I saw, for instance, like Picasso's Guernica, that stuff was like brilliant, and it said something. It made sense. It still was beautiful, but it like came from a passion of being like somebody who wants peace and doesn't want there to be atrocities and war, and how, we're all being controlled by, a few elite, basically. So I was really into that stuff. And then so when I would hang out with Chris and stuff, I would say like, let me do it. I'll do it. I could do it. You know what I mean? Like better than what you're going to get from these guys. Because he was at the time using people like Fanatic's brother had a design company in Palo Alto, which is like dead center of like the tech world. And he had like a big company, worth millions of dollars and stuff. And they would do album covers for Chris, and they actually did my album cover with Rasco called What It's All About. And it was awful, in my opinion. It was, you could see like when you're using Photoshop, you're using the blur tool, and you could see the blur on the side where you could tell it's not done correctly. There's still blur, and there's like errors in the text. Like my last name was spelled wrong. And I'm like, and this guy's like the $1 million company, and you're getting this done. And of course, Wolf's going to go like, let's use them because they're a professional $1 million company. They're going to do good, obviously. And it looks like shit. You know what I mean? And then, so I'm there going, this is fucked up. My last name's spelled wrong. There's this blur shit, And so he's like, okay, you do it. You know what I mean? And so then I started doing stuff with them. And it started out small, like doing flyers. When he did some, slip mats. Like slip mats would come in a bag, right? 2 slip mats, there's a bag, and then there's a little, like little cardboard on top that hangs on to something. And I would do like the design of that, like these little things, right? And then, remember I had that silkscreen company, I did their t-shirts, and then I could do all kinds of stuff with that, right? And so I ended up doing a few of the covers, and one was My Vinyl Weighs a Ton, and the other was Microphone Mathematics for Quasimodo. And that's where like the Quasimodo character came from. And that's how it all went down. And it's funny because...
So you did the character?
Yeah. I mean, here's the thing. You have to break it into two pieces. Before there was the image that I created, there was Quasimodo, the tape, right? That was just a tape that Madlib did for fun. He showed it to Wolf. Wolf had it in the car, and like I used to drive around with Wolf all the time and listen to it, even though it never came out. It never was even intended to come out. It was just, me and my friends just messing around. I was just high on mushrooms, just fucking around. Who cares? Whatever. I do 1 million tapes a day. It's no big deal, which, Madlib probably really does he could probably do like a few albums a day, which is insane even to think about, because I can't even finish a beat in a day. You know what I mean? Anyway, so at first it was just a voice, a high-pitched voice and cool music, right? But somebody needed to come up with something for it. And the first time I heard it, when I was like driving around in the car with Wolf, was like, it sounds like a cute little monster. Like, that's what I thought. It sounds like a little monster. And so when I was tasked to do the EP, I had to draw a monster, for myself. Like, they didn't tell me, we needed you to draw a monster. They were just like, do this album cover. I can't wait to see it. And in my mind, I'm like, this is going to be a monster. It's got to be like this monster of this weird. And so I started trying to draw monsters and going, a monster doesn't like, in my head, how do you think of drawing a monster's face, right? It can't just be like a human face, and it can't be just a normal flatter face. It's got to look crazy, you know what I mean? And so that's why I kind of drew it in a big snout, you know what I mean? Like, I wanted it to look like something that's not human, you know what I mean?
Yeah. So at what point did Gather Round happen, and had you thought, so for anyone that doesn't know, it's your album, and did you had you been thinking about putting out an album like that, or did they come to you and say,
no, so I was friends with Chris, and so I was like, Chris, let's put one of my records out. Like, I wasn't it was never like, if you would do this, or would you please do this? It was like, it would just seemed like I would do that. You know what I mean? Like, when I get done with a bunch of songs, I want to put my record out. And I showed Chris my songs, and he liked them. So he was like, let's do it. You know what I mean? And then I did the album cover for that, but actually shared the illustration work with a couple friends of mine. So if you ever looked at that album covers, there's 3 guys, like, 3 main pairs of shoes and legs. And I had 2 of my friends draw. So everybody drew one set of like shoes and one set of legs,
Yeah, it's such a good cover.
But it's a collaborative effort with that one.
Yeah. They feel like they've got a real sort of homage to them.
Yeah, there's like also a organic feel, I believe, to them. You know what I mean? It like, you feel like comfort looking at these covers, I think. And I think that is one of the things I really like about it, and one of the things why I think it works so well with hip-hop music. Hip-hop music, I think, in general, is like a warm feeling, you know what I mean? As opposed to, let's say, if we're listening to a bunch of alternative music, that stuff feels cold, in my opinion. And I think like the warmth of these covers kind of add to that, the sort of the feel of the records,
Yeah.
I think some of it has to do with that cut and paste ethics or ethos, right? The sort of sampling, you're chopping up a bunch of records, they have static on them, and then my stuff that I did album cover wise kind of is collage looking,
Yeah. And I suppose it's almost like a bit anti-hip hop at that time. But correct me if I'm wrong on that.
No, certainly. I mean, if you look at real like major label covers at that time versus what I was doing, they are night and day, you know. What a lot of covers at the time were is there. I can't remember the company, but there was like besides like pen and pixel graphics, you know, like gangster shit. Those were people love those covers, but I honestly never liked them, and I'm not gonna like say, oh yeah, in hindsight I like them, because I think they're shit, and I don't. I just think it's like almost like insulting for people to like say like, oh no, those are great covers. I think they just, I don't know. I'm not a fan of that stuff. I think it's it created like a cycle, right? It's like somebody created these covers, then everybody started making these covers, and they kind of look like kind of like a joke now, right? They look like a joke of what a gangster cover would be. Do you know what I mean? It's not. It doesn't seem. Yeah, it is. I mean, it's like literally like it's like making fun of, you know, and I don't like that feeling, you know. It's cynical in my opinion.
Yeah, I suppose at the time maybe it was everything was kind of like a bit unfinessed and raw, and certainly that kind of almost like gaudy sort of style. Yeah,
but do you know like comedians like Chris Rock would use it, you know, for his cover. And then besides him, I mean, you could think of like 1,000 other sort of comedians and people who are like think it's just a joke. Do you know what I mean? Would do that. And so that's why I just could not get behind that stuff. Now, besides that gangster look, there was a lot of album covers that were sort of, you know, they would use like a font that looks like real exciting, you know, or it could just be like a Helvetica, you know what I mean? But there'd be like a few of them staggered on top of each other, and it would have like, you know, Busta Rhymes screaming or something, you know what I mean? Like there was a lot of that kind of stuff. But I think like the covers that we were doing back then, I wanted to do what Chris wanted at the time, which was he wanted a very 1960s feel for his cover, and that's why I used orange and magenta together for his logo, and that's why it looks all 60s, that sort of I would say cadet concept look, you know. And then the cover, I took photos using a prism effect on a real camera lens, just trying to make it look like it was done a long time ago. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think it really works. So I'll try and word this right. So when the album was starting out, was there sort of between you guys a conversation about a manifesto of, okay, you know, we're going to do rap, but we're going to just, you know, the idea is we go far beyond that? Because if you look at the type of output that the label puts out now, it's kind of here, there and everywhere, and has been over a time. Was that something that was a consideration in that, you know, we don't want to do art that makes it just look like every other rap album?
Yeah. Chris was really good, where he not only wants people to, you know, sort of foster their own creativity, you know, like without being told to do something differently. He was also into a lot of weird shit, you know, like he was into strange artwork, outsider art. He was into outsider music. And so he appreciated everything that came out that was, you know, what's the word? Unorthodox, you know, for lack of a better word. He was kind of like appreciative of that stuff, you know, of like, whatever you do, let's see what it comes out like, and if I like it, I like it, that's it, you know. Like I could say I like it, but that's about it. So that was really cool, and it made it easy to do stuff. In fact, I mean, that Microphone Mathematics cover, he gave me like 2 months to do it, maybe 3, and when it was like seriously like the weekend of, I think he said he was going to come by Monday to pick it up. And it was the weekend of, and I was like, oh, shit. So I had to, like, grab a bunch of stuff in my bedroom, throw it out in front of me, grab some pens, grab some ink, grab some scissors, and I just kind of threw it together really, really quickly. And then when I showed him, he's like, I like it. We'll see what Madlib says. And then Madlib said, he looks at it and he goes, that's exactly what I was thinking, you know? And I was like, okay, cool. You know what I mean? Like, I wasn't expecting it to be so easy, but it was, you know. And with My Vinyl Weighs a Ton, it was It was me and Chris and I driving around for months to different locations in San Francisco, just coming up with ideas on what to do. I have like hundreds and hundreds of photos of Peanut Butter Wolf from that time, of just him in different positions, different images inside of tiny little cars, on like a scooter, standing in front of various speakers, just, you know, at a flea market. Like all these photos, I have hundreds of photos of Wolf, you know, trying to do this album cover for My Vinyl Weighs a Ton, you know.
Right, so we've done well over an hour there. I honestly thought we'd done about 20 minutes.
I did too. It really's been over an hour?
Yeah, we've been recording for an hour and 20.
Yeah. I told you, so, I go on tangents. I just keep talking, you know.
Yeah. So we're going to have to definitely come back for a round 2. So we'll get that penciled in a couple of weeks.
Let's do
it. Because there's even questions just on. We could probably get into like another 20 minutes now quite easily,
sure.
Based on the things that we've talked about. So, so let's leave it there, and we'll come back in for another session pretty soon.
Yeah, sounds good to me. I mean, I'm available, you know, so just hit me up anytime.
Awesome. Well, yeah, I just got to say then we'll get this out as soon as we can, and thanks for your time, and let's get one in soon.
Anytime, Adam. Thank you, man.
Cheers, man. All the best.
Take care.